Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. It's Rosh Mohammed Salih here, the editor of Five Pillars, and I'm here at Queen Mary University in East London. And the reason why I'm here is I've just attended an event about Afghanistan. Now, obviously, when we hear about Afghanistan, we hear in the Western media anyway, we hear about terrorism, we hear about women's rights being eroded and trampled upon. Now, there was a group of 8 mashayikh who visited Afghanistan, British Muslims who visited Afghanistan recently on a fact-finding mission. There was a bit of a media furore about their visit. They were accused of supporting the Taliban, etc., etc. And they haven't really spoken much about their visit, but they have today because I've just attended the event. About 300 people were there. There was quite a lot of security here, and the reason for that is because they didn't want the mainstream media or anyone else, Islamophobes, trying to scupper the event. But in any case, the mashayikh all spoke about their experiences in Afghanistan. They said that the media representation by the Western media in particular was completely false. They talked about the reality of life there, and they talked specifically about what British Muslims can do to help the Ummah, as well as that burning issue of women's education, women's rights in Afghanistan. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
Alhamdulillah, the journey to Afghanistan, I'm sure all of the mashayikh, including myself, we went with a very open mind. The introduction was mentioned as well, that we didn't go siding with anybody. So for myself, first and foremost, I found Afghan people, mashallah, very kind, very generous, very big-hearted, very resilient people. But the greatest impact it had on me and my life, and since I've come back, I've been speaking to many people, it brought back to life for me the stories of the Sahaba we read, mashallah, those who gave sacrifices for Islam, those who were willing to do anything for Islam. Sometimes we read these stories in many various books, stories of the Anbiya alayhimus salam as well, and we think that those were those times. These people don't exist in this day and age. But for me, speaking to them, speaking to many of the mashayikh there as well and the ulama, it showed to me that these people have the same passion, the same zeal as the Sahaba did. And many things, many of the sunnahs that we hear in the books, mashallah, it brought back to life for me. Secondly, mashallah, these people, a lot of people say the Afghan people are very strong, physically very strong, but also it refreshed my iman because their iman is very strong as well. Speaking to them, sometimes maybe it was for them a time to offload and heal as well their stories, the loss they've had. They've not just given their lives, their limbs, their sacrifices, their money, their wealth. And they mentioned this, that to get our country back, we gave a lot. It's very easy to sit in the government today, and the officials and the authorities mention this. So in short, mashallah, I can say in this day and age, if somebody wants to look at anybody following the Prophet ﷺ and the Sunnah of the Sahaba, then look towards these people.
Before leaving England, I thought about, what will Afghanistan be like? Because whenever we look at the media, I was yet to see anything positive coming from mainstream at least. We may find a few snippets here and there on social media which showed Afghanistan as a country, the Afghan people, in positive light, but nothing on mainstream. So for me, thinking about Afghanistan, it was very clouded. Didn't know what it was, unclear. And I still recall, as soon as we landed at the airport, I said to my colleague that it just feels like Pakistan 30 years ago. So the same, it's slightly old. The buildings are not as modernized. We were firstly hit by the Afghan, hospitality straight away at the airport. That's where it all began, and it never ended, all the way till we found ourselves in the airport again, having to come back. For me, that was somewhat of a, quite sad and painful experience leaving that land. Because I'll be very honest, and I've said this very clearly, that there was something there, a feeling, outright freedom. And I'm saying this because, and coming back to the point that I was thinking, we prayed Friday prayers at the masjid there, and there was a young imam, his picture was in one of these as well, and his son came, and this is during the khutbah, it was a reminiscence of the Prophet ﷺ's masjid, where his sons came, and he welcomed them, and similarly he welcomed him right onto the by the mihrab. And interestingly, it was the 10th of Muharram, and we were obviously expecting the speech or the khutbah to be about 10th of Muharram. Okay. However, it was about interest, riba. And we later questioned the Imam, why is that the case? And it was interesting because the Afghan government, okay, they have a focus. And after speaking to many ministers, we realized what freedom meant. Okay? They were trying to free themselves, not just from physical oppression, physical subjugation, okay, and colonialism, but also financial, economic, and also intellectual enslavement as well.
Of course, the observations are a lot. I mentioned one observation about Afghanistan, which is a trivial one. I don't think that the Mashayikh will mention it, which is the level of professionalism of the leaders of the government was really amazing, to the level that whenever we had a meeting with any of the officials, they carry their PA, or PAs, they carry notes. And during the discussion, they just take notes. They write. And I said, wow, we only see this in America or in Europe. We don't see it in the Arab world or as they say, the third world, which shows that this is a symbolic representation that they want to be professional, they want to do something for their country, for the Ummah. So may Allah help them to do that.
The first Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا. When you land in Afghanistan, when you meet Afghan people, when you see the situation in Afghanistan, we realize, or we come to realize, how much we have been fed by media incorrectly. The image we have regarding Afghanistan, the situation that we think we understand, and I emphasize this point, we think we understand, is totally different to the realities on the ground. The people, the situation the people are in, the happiness the people feel, and the contentment that the people are feeling in Afghanistan is totally different to what is portrayed to us through the media, through social media channels, through individuals who have certain agendas in presenting a certain image of Afghanistan. Therefore, my request, and again, it's not promotion, but my request is that any information you seek regarding Afghanistan, then seek those through proper channels like Prosper Afghanistan. That's my first point. The second point I wanted to make, which again Sheikh Haytham briefly mentioned, is the cleanliness in Afghanistan. We think we live in the UK, in a first world country, in a well-developed country. Since I've come back from Afghanistan on this trip, the common joke I've been making is the cleanliness, or regarding the cleanliness of the streets of Kabul that we see, and regarding the streets of Manchester that I live in. It's drastically different. The streets in Afghanistan are clean, crystal clear compared to the streets in Manchester. And I'm sure London's the same as well. We're not that bad up north. The effort the government is putting behind these avenues, which are not portrayed in the media, which are not spoken about by people when they're discussing Afghanistan, is something that we need to pick up on. It's something we need to focus on. Not because, as Dr. Anas said, we're fanboys, but because it's only fair that when we think we have the privilege to speak about a group of people, then we speak about them in their entirety. We give a clear picture of the situation there.
I feel that we are a little bit, or maybe, brainwashed by the Islamophobic media about this issue. Because, look, a huge country that has been suffering from different wars, different occupations, okay, by the main two superpowers occupying or attempt to occupy it for more than 40 plus years. They have an array of challenges. And then the Islamophobic media, what about the education of women? Yeah, they banned women from education. They banned women from going to the saloons. They banned women from going without abaya, etc. And then many Muslims, after I came, the first thing they asked me, what about women's education? I say, brothers, free yourself from being colonized by the Islamophobic media that it sets the narrative for you. Yeah, brothers, be careful. You don't just. One brother actually called me from Germany, one sheikh. He said, "But sheikh, you agree with me that women's education is important?" I said, "Yes, I agree with you. Don't think that we are not. It's not education, but there are priorities." And we should not ask about this question in an Islamophobic package. Yeah, we should have our own platform when we talk about this issue, because we know, and I learned from you, you are my sheikh in this matter, okay, that there are two things some enemies of Islam use to interfere in any country. The first one is minorities, and the second one is women. Yeah, in order to interfere, they use minorities. They suppress minorities. They suppress women, and they use this as an excuse. They are not genuine in caring for minorities. Yes, brothers, sisters, please be careful. They are not genuine. They are not really worried about women's education in Afghanistan. They are using this as an agenda. Yeah. Okay, so the first dua, Ibrahim alayhi salam, قال رب اجعل هذا بلدا آمنا. So security is the first element of what? Of establishing a country. And the second one is what? وارزق أهله من الثمرات. Yeah, which is what? Economy. And the third one, then the spiritual kind of dimension. The first requirement for our country, for a state, is what? Security. The second one is what? Economy. Even da'wah, brothers, comes later. You are giving to a hungry person da'wah, he will say, Habibi, I need to eat first. And then once I am full, or my children are full, then give me da'wah. Is that true or not? So, and the Prophet ﷺ, as our Sheikh said, من أصبح منكم آمنا في سربه واجدا قوت يومه فكأنما حيزت له الدنيا بحذافيرها. The one who wakes up in the morning, he is safe and he finds food for his day, then he is what? As if he got the entire dunya. So, the first question should be, what is the security situation in Afghanistan? Yeah? That should, if we are genuine about worrying about the situation of Afghanistan, and if they are worried about women's situation, are women harassed? Yeah? Is it true that the Islamic people in Afghanistan, they harass women? Yeah? What do they do if they see a woman without hijab? What is about the economy of Afghanistan? And in brief, brothers, security, subhanallah, it is the first year, they said 2022, sorry for using the Gregorian calendar, but in 2022 is the first year in 40 plus years, there is no war whatsoever in the entire area of Afghanistan, which is something to be praised. The second thing is, in terms of economy, the inflation in Afghanistan is Afghanistan is one of the top 10 countries in terms of what? Reduction of inflation. Yeah, even they say that the Afghani, which is the main currency of Afghanistan, is doing better than the rupees next to them in Pakistan. So these are and then we can discuss other things, like women's education, other education, etc.
So very clearly, Islam doesn't forbid at all, rather it promotes education for our sisters. Prophet ﷺ promoted education for everyone. So with that in mind, I wanted to deeply understand what is happening in terms of girls' education in Afghanistan. What are they facing, on an objective level, and not looking at, not talking about Western media, but what are the issues that the brothers are facing and the sisters are facing in Afghanistan. So I just want to quickly summarize our discussions, and we had this discussion with almost every minister we met. So just to summarize it, two of the ministers that we met. The very first minister, he's a foreign minister, okay? Maulvi Amir Khan Muttaqi. We met him, I'd say, within the first few hours of us landing in Afghanistan, and that set the stage. And the second was a few days later, where we met the former Minister of Higher Education. So you can't get anyone better to ask about this, very question. And the very first thing I recall Maulvi Amir Khan Muttaqi saying is, we have never said, and we never will say, that girls' education is haram. So that's the theological jurisprudence side of it. We've never said that. However, listen to our context. And this is what we want to relay. The Sheikh said, the foreign minister said, that first of all, there are 10 million students in Afghanistan. And that's out of a population of just over 40 million. So 1 in every 4 Afghans is a student. And this is both boys and girls. Now let's look and focus on girls' education. He said that all girls in Afghanistan now are educated up to what he said, Daraja Shash, which means year 6. So I'm guessing that covers the entirety of primary school. So girls in Afghanistan are not stopped from education, especially during their period in primary school. And we physically, empirically saw that because we went to a primary school. The infrastructure needed improvement, and already we have charities working on those schools that we went to, alhamdulillah, straight away. So that's the first thing. All girls go to school up until age 10 or 11. That's the first thing. Once they reach the age where they are now transitioning over to secondary school, we currently had to limit that. Okay? Now they have 4 avenues to go into. So it doesn't mean education has completely been stopped in every avenue, no. So the 4, he said, girls can continue if they choose to become doctors, nurses, anything to do with medicine or hospitals. They continue that journey all the way up until universities. So yes, there are still, as we speak, our sisters in education, in higher education as well. The second avenue our sisters can take is within education. So if they want to become teachers, they continue till university. Now this point is very important for me because that shows the intent of the Afghan government. Why are they, pushing for girls to be educated as teachers if they have no intention to allow them to study in the future? So they need teachers. And on that point, I just want to add an anecdote where we met, the former higher education minister, Maulvi Abdullahi. He said, as soon as Kabul was taken over in 2021, obviously the infrastructure is important, but one of the first things he was told by the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the supreme leader there, to do was, the first thing was to employ 1,000 female teachers so that they can educate the girls. This is the first thing. So for me, the intent is very, very clear. It's not a complete ban on girls' education. Yes, it's a temporary suspension, not on education. Temporary suspension on specific secular liberal education. That's what it's a suspension on. The third thing that our sisters can do in Afghanistan is vocational studies. So skills-based studies, they can continue to learn various skills. And we ourselves went to a vocation center, which the other Mashayikh will talk about as well. So I'm not going to go into detail, but they were going to, when we were there, over a few hundred sisters were going to join the following month or so. The fourth avenue that where girls can continue in higher education is through the Dar al-Ulum. Okay. Now, interesting thing about the Dar al-Ulum, so these are the seminaries or Islamic higher educational institutes. There, interestingly in the Dar al-Ulums there, is that they combine religious and secular studies within their Dar al-Ulum. So, in a sense, if a sister wants to study in Afghanistan, she wants to study secular studies, she can still do that, but via the Dar al-Ulum. Okay, so that's, for me, was an interesting point. So then after that, he did mention that, look, we were on the battlefield, the physical jihad for 20 years. However, following that, and I want to fast forward to what the Minister for the former Minister for Higher Education said, that, 1,000 sisters being employed in education. What happened? Why did they have to suspend, right, liberal, secular, specific education? Not education. It's not that they have not banned education. They have banned specifically liberal, secular education. The Afghan people are deeply religious people. Okay? So what the Sheikh said was, after they allowed the universities to continue, they've got to remember that at that time there were about 40 government-funded universities and 150 private universities funded by the international community. So what happened was, they felt, as the months progressed, that there was now international influence, Western, secular, liberal influence being driven into the minds of the students who were now, they were speaking against the Sharia, which is the framework of the country. Not only that, many vices were creeping in, which were against the government's policy. Okay, so we're not going to get into what they were, but at that point, the ulama were taken aback, and especially the traditional ulama living in the suburbs, traditional ulama who lived all their lives in the villages. About a small percentage of them, they were taken aback by this, and they took this matter directly to the Amir, and they put this forward to him. And now began what the Shaykh spoke about, was ikhtilaf. Okay? Now what they wanted, what they said to us, look, 20 years we were united together, and now when it's time to build the country, we cannot tolerate ikhtilaf at this stage. Okay? And therefore, temporary suspension of liberal, secular education took place.
But Amir Khan Nuttaqi, this is a point I want to mention. Amir Khan Nuttaqi himself and other ministers in following meetings as well we had, stressed on a point to our host, and that was, do not keep them secluded to meetings, arrange for visits to markets, arrange for visits to other sites, so that they're not only exposed to ministers and officials, but rather they're exposed to public and they see the situation with their own eyes. That's just to clarify the question that you asked. The minister himself, the foreign minister himself, wanted us to go out into the markets to see the situation with our own eyes, without a tint or without individuals blocking that view for us. So as far as your question is concerned, the ministers themselves, the responsible authorities themselves, wanted to ensure that whatever message we took back to UK or took back to our lands with was the correct picture, was the accurate picture, and not something that was just gifted to us on a plate.
Biased, Allah save us from that as well. We want to relay the truth. This was a fact-finding journey, and what we saw, I think everybody is trying to be as impartial as possible. But I think it's been reiterated many times about the Western media, that the country we live in, especially this country and generally Europe and the West, you're bombarded with negative images of this government and generally Muslims. Let's be fair, in this country with ourselves as well, you have a beard, you wear a hijab and niqab, what for the last 20 or 30 years, what we've been portrayed as well.
How can we support Afghanistan? First of all, we need to make sure one of the ultimate aims is that the sanction, the economic sanction, to come to an end. Yeah, this is so important, and because of a number of reasons, from an Islamic perspective, the humanitarian perspective, from all perspectives. And you don't know, if you put pressure in that, maybe that your pressure will lead to some positive consequences. The other thing is, we need a fair media coverage. Yeah, unfortunately, the media so far is not neutral. We just want them to be neutral, and this is your job, my dear brothers and sisters. For example, if you hear any negative news about Afghanistan, which is untrue, speak to the media immediately. Yeah, write to them, brothers, sisters, be active, do something in your life. You can achieve a lot. The other thing is, we need to push also for positive engagement with the authorities there. Yeah, because whatever you like it, you don't like it, but they are the status quo. And why until now very few countries have officially recognized the current government. Investment, it was mentioned, brothers, if you can invest in anything, then that will be good. Recently, actually 2 days ago, maybe we need to discuss this, a group of doctors, I was with them, and they said, Sheikh, will they host us? And will they provide us with information if we go to them and we tell them that we can help to improve the healthcare system? I said, yes, this is guaranteed. So this is another idea. If any of you has any experience in education, in industry, then the brothers in Prosper Afghanistan, this will be one of their main jobs, to liaise between us and them and to help them. And you can do a lot, brothers. Many of you, mashallah, and sisters, very intelligent. All of you are intelligent, academic. You can do a lot for our Muslim Ummah. 1 month of vacation, go there and do something.
But the number one support that I recommend before we put any money down is visit Afghanistan.
Exactly.
That's the number one support you can give to our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan, is by visiting Afghanistan. You will have a clearer picture and you'll be able to give out clear pictures.
A group of us, we saw that there was a number of problems when the issue of Afghanistan was being discussed. First of all, as the Mashaykh mentioned, there's a lack of reliable information in terms of what's actually happening in the country. In terms of mainstream media outlets, what do we hear? We hear two things all the time: Taliban and women's education. There's very little objective, fair reporting. Alhamdulillah, we've got our brothers from 5 Pillars here, Afghan Eye. But other than that, there's very few outlets where there's objective, fair and balanced reporting. The second problem that we've seen is, after 20 years of war and devastation, Afghanistan is still one of the poorest countries in the world. There's a humanitarian crisis there in Afghanistan. Thirdly, there's widespread confusion and fear amongst our own community. Can we travel there? Is it legal? What's the risk? What's the implications? What about speaking about Afghanistan? Even mentioning Afghanistan in your workplace, you say to your work colleagues that you traveled there, there'll be alarm. There's a lot of confusion and fear in our own community. So we saw these problems, and as a result of this, we decided to take an initiative, this community-led initiative, to establish this organization. Our mission is to enhance public understanding of Afghanistan and provide reliable information to UK Muslim communities that promotes support for the development of Afghanistan. We want to see Afghanistan emerge from in a post-war era to be prosperous, and we want to enhance the public understanding of Afghanistan. What's actually happening on the ground? What's the reasons for the policies? Is there progress in terms of infrastructure development, economic development? This is our mission. So we've got 3 main strategic goals. Firstly is the creation of a public platform for the English-speaking audience to enhance the public understanding of what's happening in Afghanistan. Secondly, to create a forum to provide reliable information for those who want to support the rebuilding efforts. And that includes humanitarian assistance, that includes investment, economic development. So if you want to go buy land, set up a business, how do you do that? And that includes also, as Sheikh Haytham mentioned, traveling for work. If you're a doctor, you have skills, you're an engineer, you have skills. Or even just for tourism, how do you do that? And lastly, as the Sheikh mentioned, Our key strategic goal is to promote engagement with UK and international organisations. We want the organisations to engage. We've seen the strategy of war and devastation and what that leads to in terms of the suffering and the deprivation of the people. Engagement is the policy, and this is actually happening at the moment.